Welcome back to Dark Stories for You. Today's story, Chilling House in Italy. You've seen these ads. €1 houses in Europe, Italy mostly. Crumbling buildings, usually centuries old, listed for just €1 with the stipulation that you renovate it, make it structurally sound and live there part of the year. I bought one in an auction, no other bidders. The story is a warning to anyone thinking of doing it. It sucks the life out of you. Back up. It's 2021, middle of the pandemic. These deals start to show up en masse, all over the internet, promoted by sell-it-all-and-go financial freedom stories on CNN, AP, BBC, Reuters. Cheery talking heads raving about it, podcasters chattering and bemoaning cost of living. I bit. Life was not going anywhere interesting for me. I'd saved up about $30,000, which seemed a lot. But in the grand scheme, it was little. A pittance. I wanted a shock to the system, and a €1 ramshackle building in an ancient Italian countryside village provided a project I could actually afford. A plane, train, and taxi ride later, and I found myself in southern Italy. I won't tell you the name of the village. It was in the heel of the boot. I spent the first week in a hotel. The day I arrived, I met an official with the municipality and someone who presented himself as a surveyor, although I hadn't been aware of his role. "I ensure a proper fit between property and titolare," he'd said. "Didn't we do that already? I got approved for the purchase." "Yes," he had said, "but we like to get a sense for you." They accompanied me to the property, had me sign a few loose papers in a disorganized leather folio, handed me a ring of keys, and hurried off. "Hey, wait, that's it?" I called out through my mask. "It's okay," said the municipal official, pulling his mask down to reveal a grin. He eyed the tall stone structure behind me. "Yours?" he pointed, waved, etc. The surveyor stood looking at me a moment longer before making some kind of salutation with his arm and walking off. Italians have a spoken language, but most communication, it seems, is gestural. So there I stood, alone, cobblestones beneath my feet, in a quiet lane hugged by crooked ancient residences, in a village far from home, far from familiarity. I looked up at my building. It was squeezed by its neighbors. Only 2 stories. Its plaster facade had crumbled to reveal powdery stones haphazardly stacked, its mortar soft to the touch. But the building stood. I felt a sense of pride. As only the latest proprietor, when I turned the iron key, I listened to its mechanism click in the knowledge that many had come before me. The street was empty, and my door opened with the sounds of architectural arthritis that bounced around in echoes. In my mind, I pictured myself rising from a couch, grunting as my joints adjusted and cracked. "Don't worry, old girl," I said, patting the door casing as I stepped over the threshold. "We'll take care of you." Bureaucracy is difficult anywhere. It's especially difficult in Italy. The whole point was to attract investment and people to dying municipalities so that new young life could revitalize them. But paperwork is ageless. You'll likely be in the middle of doing something when you die, just as you'll likely be waiting on some paperwork. I finally got the permesso di costruire, my construction permit. I'd started the process months previous. You'd think it'd be included with the sweet €1 deal? Nope. Extra legwork, far more sweaty than actual labor. After a week in the hotel, I moved in, so to speak. I had permission to sleep there. There was no electricity yet. Water was flowing, but rusty yellow. I bought big jugs of bottled water for drinking. The drains were clear. On entering, one was greeted with a cramped front foyer. Broken mosaic floor tiles told of a time when a previous owner cared for this space. Torn and faded wallpaper reached a rotting plaster ceiling, and hanging lights that would need replacing dangled in a mess of cobwebs and silky occupied spider webs. A staircase of questionable sturdiness immediately led upstairs to a pair of bedrooms, a bathroom, and a rear-facing veranda. On the ground floor, one found a country kitchen in the back and a den and living room space sandwiched together through a doorway from the foyer. The basement was a dirt floor cellar. All told, its interior felt designed more for a small New York City brownstone than an Italian village flat, but it suited me. At this point, you should be wondering about the dilapidation. I've described a home. You thought the €1 properties were moldy shells of medieval rot, or that everything would need to be rebuilt, restabilized, gutted, and renovated with $30,000 additional dollars. I thought the same. Naturally, it came as a surprise to learn that after a bit of cleaning, painting, plumbing, and electrical upgrades, my new home would be livable, a true €1 investment. I wasn't even sure if the building permit had been necessary. What a dream. But alas, this is where I must caution you. If your €1 purchase is not a mound of rubble, run. If your purchase is a legitimate, livable home, you need to run. If your new Italian villa is not roofless and dead, then do what I say. Get away. I learned what the fine print ought to have been, and I fled. I exited Italy and went back to my strip mall neighborhood in Middle America, where it's safe. If I tell you outright what happened, you won't believe me. I have to tell you what happened in the order that it did, so that my conclusions ring true for you. So that if you find yourself there, you can remember the signs I'm writing about, and you can book it the hell out of Dodge. It started the first night I slept in that house. A new mattress occupied a very old bed frame in one of the upstairs bedrooms. I'd purchased it and had it delivered. I had a sleeping bag and draped it over myself like a sheet. As cool as this building was, southern Italy is still hot. I would sleep with a glass of bottled water on the floor beside the bed. I laid awake staring at peeling plaster overhead, ruminating on the week to come. Perhaps I was fortunate to be awake still. Not that I would have heard anything, because there was no sound. There was no smell, nor anything to see. It was what I felt that shocked me to my feet. I can only describe it as pressure. A pressure that was uniformly distributed on my chest and belly. If you lay face down on a hard surface, breathing is restricted. That's what I felt, as if I were being clasped in a body-length vice. I even wheezed in response, throwing the sleeping bag and launching into the air and into a barefooted stance, sucking air as if I'd just sprinted 100 yards. I felt suddenly afraid, and my torso was perspiring, shivering cold. Needless to say, I did not sleep much that night. The next morning, I left as soon as the cafe bars would be open. I popped into one, the only one in the village, actually, ordered an espresso al banca, paid, and downed the shot. My attempt at fitting in. Everyone still wore masks between sips. Having paid tribute to Italy's coffee culture, I strolled down a few sunny streets and felt reinvigorated to the task at hand, my renovation. I've had chest pains since childhood. Last night was probably just anxiety. I spent the day cleaning, swept the floors, wrangled the cobwebs and spiders, wiped down kitchen surfaces, cleaned the bathroom. Tomorrow I'd start ripping out soft plaster and moldy wallpaper. Sure, it'd be a mess again, but I wanted to see the place as it was before I started changing it. Later in the week, I had an appointment with an electrician to come in, and a plumber would come to ensure the pipes were sound. Having spent all day cleaning, except for the cellar, which I had only glanced into, I went to one of 2 local trattorias for dinner. Everyone was masked up. Between the coffee bar and the restaurant, I noticed that villagers here were old, retirees all, old enough to have retired in the 90s even. It was a stark reminder about why Italian municipalities offered €1 property young people left. The door creaked open back at my house. I closed it behind me, latching it shut. Eerie. Every sound I made seemed to echo, but off of plaster. I stood in the foyer, looking down the hall toward the kitchen. The place seemed different now that I'd cleaned it. Somehow it felt oppressive. The kitchen felt far away. It seemed to move, stretching outward, as if I was watching it reshape itself through a spyglass. This tunnel vision experience ceased as abruptly as it had begun. I felt dizzy. Maybe it was the prosciutto. I allowed my legs to carry me upstairs, where I crashed into bed, dead asleep. For all of what felt like an instant. I shot awake, startled, sweating, hyperventilating, barely able to suck enough oxygen. I rolled violently off the mattress, slamming into the glass of water which shattered, cutting my forearm. I moaned. My chest felt collapsed. It was as if my ribcage was screwing shut around my organs. I crawled on elbows toward the bathroom, retrieving a headlamp from my backpack on the way, which I wrapped on my head and clicked on. I hauled myself along the floor until I was in the bathroom, panting for air as I journeyed. Painfully, I retook my feet in front of the bathroom mirror. What the hell? I remember thinking. What the hell? Staring with frightened eyes back at me was my reflection, but I had aged about 10 years. Gray in my beard that hadn't been there, under-eye wrinkles that seemed freshly creased. The pressure on my chest finally lifted, and I stood there in the flickering headlamp light, waiting for the nightmare to end. Blood streamed into the sink where I held onto it, as if it was the only solid truth to ground me. What the hell? Jolting me back into the moment was a distant banging noise. What's that? I asked myself aloud in a startled voice. Even my voice sounded older. I had aged. More banging. Grabbing a hand towel from the rack, I clasped it around my arm to stem the bleeding. Bang, bang, from downstairs. I stepped into the hall, leaned against the wall for stability, clasping my toweled arm, step by step down the staircase. Bang, step, bang, step. When I reached the foyer, an especially loud bang told me it came from the cellar. I was scared out of my mind. My throat was dry and burned. My chest felt delicate. My fear was so profound at this point that I murmured like a baby. What is it that kept me walking toward the cellar door? I can't say. I only know that I went there. I opened that door, and I walked down the steps into that musty cavern, the banging having fully resolved into a loud intonation that caused me to jump each time it smacked the air, bouncing off surfaces and stinging like icicles stabbing in my eardrums. How had I not seen it before? A shape against the back stone wall, which was moist with condensation. Square, wide, tall. I approached, my headlamp stupidly drained already and illuminating weakly. I recognized the fixture, a box bed, their old medieval enclosed beds, made to look like cupboards. People would sleep inside them. Bang! I jumped. Bang! My body reacted, jumped. I bit my lip reflexively. Bang! Bit clean through the edge of my lip. I wiped blood onto the already bloody hand towel. How did I reach out toward this object? Why did I feel obligated to be here, to do this? How did I not flee? Bang! It was as though I departed my own body and floated above myself, watching my arms reach out, one still holding the other's compress. I watched as my one free, bloodied hand unlatched the box bed door. Bang! It opened, but my perception was at an angle that kept the interior in darkness until I gingerly stepped forward with bare feet on the cold dirt floor, and my consciousness settled back into my weight, using my own eyes to look into the box bed with the headlight. Bang! My heart palpitated in my throat at the vision. It was like looking at a corpse that death had abandoned. Laying lengthwise in an ancient, threadbare nightshirt, propped on an elbow and facing away from the box bed opening, was what seemed so skinny a body as to be fleshless. Its free arm, skeletal and with taut black salt-cured skin, was raised, poised. Bang! It slammed its emaciated hand hard into the box bed's far wooden panel wall, sending a resounding burst of fear deep into my heart. I stumbled back and tripped. I fell onto the floor screaming in pain when my injured arm braced against the fall. On my back, I lamely scrambled backward, but was frozen by the figure's attention, now turned toward me. It grasped the box bed edge with zombie-like appendages and peered at me. Eyes so deep in their sockets, the only glint was needle-tipped, a face of stretched skin like a mummy's. Wisps of coarse, white hair sprouting from liver-spotted baldness, rotted teeth. It stared right at me, moving slowly in its crib. It leveled a gaunt finger in my direction. Then he spoke in a voice for death throes. "Dummy de pew," it breathed. "Give me more." I retreated rapidly, got to my feet, and lurched for the stairs. "Give me more!" it shrilled as I threw my bleeding arm into the effort to climb the stairs as fast as I could. I kicked open the front door, leaving behind everything including my shoes, and sprinted down the cobblestone lane for all of 15 seconds, when my toe caught painfully in a crevice and I flew forward, landing face down. My headlight was broken, smashed to pieces on the cobblestone. That's when I noticed them. People, the villagers. They stood in shadows under the buildings lining the street, a few dozen. A bit of starlight was enough to make them out. I struggled to control a racing chest that was pumping horror throughout my shaking body and the sharp pains in my arm and lip. Now this revelation of these observant elders. Had I completely registered how very old they appeared? None now wore masks. I don't know if it was my raging fear, the adrenaline, the darkness. But as I scanned the quiet, speechless faces of the villagers, I thought of how near death they all looked, how taut and wretched their faces, how deep the canyons of their folded neck skin. How old were they? I leapt up and sprinted to save my life. Don't ask me where the energy came from. I ran until morning, leaving the village far behind. My feet bled. Eventually a car passed, and a younger fellow took me into the city. I had a friend wire money, and I left Italy the next day with new shoes and nothing else to my name. I often wonder about my physiological age. People who know me have noticed the change, especially my mom. Deflection is my only strategy. I'll never get those years back. They were stolen from me somehow in a small Italian village, a village of maniacs who might be hundreds of years old. I don't know. All I know is this. If you're tempted to buy a house in Italy for €1, don't.